Uh, Hello, everyone. It's a real honor and pleasure to introduce Ben Mirin. I've got to know him actually quite recently as a collaborator on the Sky Island Beatbox project. And since Ben won't have any slides, I'm going to leave this information here for you in case you want to reach out and understand the rest of his schedule. So Ben uses music as a gateway to the natural world. And he's a birder and a musician. He's been beatboxing and watching birds almost all his life. And he's only recently kind of combined these two passions together. But actually, that's not a good summary of Ben because, as I've got to know him now, the whole is clearly greater than the sum of its parts. And Ben's understanding actually is very, very, very deep, and he has a very strong interest in academic research. And probably that's because of the academic setting that he grew up in because of his parents. And he also has a very strong sense of investigation, and he looks for intellectual challenges in his work. So there's a sense of scientific narrative in his work all throughout. And he's also very deeply motivated by conservation. And through his specialization of extracting music which is there in nature, in natural sounds, he's won several accolades, and he's also the creator and the host of a National Geographic show that's yet to be announced, actually. And his music's appeared on TEDx, NPR, and National Geographic. And coincidentally, he's also worked on creating a lemur song with Patricia Wright. And those of you who've been here at the last SCCS, Patricia was one of the plenary speakers here. And he's also the artist in residence with the Science and Society program at NCBS that's hosting Ben. And Sky Island Beatbox project is in some ways, as Ben says, the first major project where he can actually go to the place where these birds are from, so where his subjects are, and where the conservation impact will be. So he's very excited about this, and I'm really happy to have him here and welcome him.
Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm actually going to turn the lavalier off because I'm going to do some music first.
Check. Check 1, 2.
Testing, 1, 2. So my name is Ben Mirin, and I make music from a combination of human beatbox and birdsong. What's really amazing about nature and the music studio is that the principles of sound arrangement are often very similar. In order to make itself heard, an individual instrument or a voice must carve out its own unique spot in the mix and find its own rhythm, its own musicality to stand out from the background noise. This essential principle, referred oftentimes to as sonic partitioning in the field of bioacoustics, is a central tenet of the music you just heard. Indeed, it's the guiding principle that I use in all of my musical arrangements so that the language of birdsong is never lost for what it truly is, which is a beautiful musical tone that is full and rich with meaning. But there are really two types of language at work here. The other is that of human beatbox. Now, for those of you who don't know, human beatboxing is music made entirely with your mouth. It's a very personal style of musical expression, and beatboxers around the world engage in this constant process of testing the physical and creative capacities of their vocal cords. It's quite convenient because the instrument goes with you everywhere you go, so whether it's annoying to other people or not is another story, but you can test it out for yourself pretty much anywhere, and that means you can absorb sounds as you go, and when you meet another beatboxer for the first time, a kind of knowledge exchange occurs that's outside the parameters of traditional human communication. I've been engaged in this process since I was 9 years old, and after graduating from university, I ended up living in Japan for 2 years. Now, I taught myself Japanese, but when I first moved there, I didn't speak any Japanese. So a lot of my social interactions were very gestural, a lot of, yeah, I don't really know how to say this, but okay, thanks. I fell into the arts scene as a beatboxer. In fact, I was thrown on the stage with a lot of hip-hop artists in particular. So I started to meet a lot of Japanese beatboxers, and this was fascinating to me because I couldn't really talk to them, but we would spend hours trading licks and sharing different parts of our musical repertoires, and every time we came away from that musical conversation, we would have a richer understanding of who each person was, as well as how to combine our musical styles in a symphonic way. I'll give you an example of this. One of the techniques that I learned in Japan is called bunsuke bunsuke, and it's quite an apt name because it really sounds like that. Oh, sorry. He's making crazy face sounds and I don't like it. Like I said, sometimes it goes over well, other times. We'll catch up later. But the bunsuke bunsuke pattern is very evocative of the Japanese language. Japanese, for those of you who haven't heard it, is very staccato, steady, rhythmic language, whereas English, like the kind I'm speaking to you now, has a lot of fluctuations, up, down, start, stop. And so the techniques that I was able to share really seemed to connect with a lot of my linguistic background. In fact, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. The same instrument we use to make beatbox sounds is what we use to speak every day. So the muscles that you build up over your lifetime will shape how you articulate that music. So I showed them a couple techniques that were quite foreign to them. One example of the start-stop thing that I was talking to you about is the vocal scratch. That's something they had never heard. Well, maybe you haven't heard it before either, but it was certainly new in Japan. Another technique that they hadn't heard was the throat bass. So they had never done these things before. Those are old traditions. Interrupt me with applause whenever you want. That's totally fine. Thank you. So I was able to teach them these techniques, and they taught me the bunsuke, and we came away with a combination of the two. And if you spend your whole life doing this, oh, you haven't seen nothing yet. I've been to a lot of really cool places around the world now, thanks to beatbox, and also my passion for birds, which I'll get to in a moment. The beatboxing community around the world has shown me that this is a musical conversation about personal identity, and that the vocabulary that you build up over the course of your life is really a sonic blueprint of who you are. Much like the sonic blueprint of an ecosystem tells you something about its condition, the blueprint of a beatboxer tells you where that person's been, what he or she draws on for musical inspiration. And you get something like this. It don't matter to me, I'm fit up, answer your call. Baby, you want it right now, you've got to give it all. You don't even need a map, I will watch you rise again. It don't matter to me, unless you get down like get down like me, peppermint, fresh like me. Get down like me. Listen to the click track, you will see. Ape. I like this one. How you doing, Bangalore? That's awesome. Let me hear you say, I'm alright. Let me hear you say, I'm alright. Let me hear you say, I'm alright. Let me hear you say, okay, maybe later. Hey, that girl. Let me fall for you. Let me talk to you. Cause the song's about you. Hey, that girl. Let me fall for through. Someone make sure that guy's okay. The boomerang hit him in the head, so I want to, no casualties on Birdbox. That'd be great. So, everything you just heard has a linguistic origin. In beatbox, there's a linguistic subtext, a narrative to be drawn in individual sound waves pulled from the experience of every single noisemaker on the planet. But when it comes to birdsong, the meaning is plainly there. We're literally talking about language that sounds like music to our ears, influenced by millions of years of evolution, complex anatomy, and amazing behavioral adaptations that, at the end of the day, make beatboxers look like amateurs. If you want real vocal acrobats, look no further than the world of birds. That is the call of the laughing thrush. It's the oldest endemic species in the Western Ghats. It lives just a few hundred kilometers from here at the tops of these mountains in remote sky island habitats and nowhere else on the planet. Now, when I introduce a bird like that to you, it sounds quite remote, distant, maybe even inaccessible, but the fact is, we can use music as our bridge to understanding this species. The natural rhythms, melodies, and really musicality of the bird song can frame our musical interpretation of how to make sense and tell the story of this bird. And when we do that and combine it with human beatbox, we get something new, a fusion of human and bird languages into a complex package that represents not only the sophistication of a single species, but of an entire ecosystem and our creative relationship to it as artists, as scientists, as conservationists, as storytellers. And ultimately, it opens the door to discovering new amazing sounds in the same place. So can anyone other than Robin tell me what bird species that is? I'm hearing it, scimitar babbler. Yeah, exactly. It's the Travancore scimitar babbler, a subspecies of the Indian scimitar babbler. And I have it sampled here on my launch pad. But when you can master this kind of technology to play around and really pull the musicality out of this natural sound, you can listen to something like this and realize this opens up a whole new universe, musically speaking, and we can play with it in different ways and see how it kind of jives with our internal musical drive. So you can get something like this instead. So you heard another bird species, brown-headed barbet. I'm now going to play for you another song that is comprised of 5 different bird species from the Western Ghats. I want you to listen carefully as they enter the mix and see if you can figure out what those species are. And then after the talks are over, we can come up and you can see if you're right. If anyone's interested in beatboxing, never forget this.
Show me how to fly. I love it. 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 Show me how to show me how to fly. I love it. Show me how to fly.
I hate being behind that table. I just want to come out and say hi. One of the most amazing things that you draw from working so closely with birdsong is that you come away from every musical session with an almost startling amount of knowledge about the natural world. You sit down to compose a beat or a song of some sort, and then when you get up again, suddenly you can identify all the bird calls you're working with when you encounter the real thing in the wild. I encourage all of you to go to skyisland.in/beatbox and register for our bird walk tomorrow, because we'll be walking around here on campus and recording as many of the sounds that we hear as possible and documenting all the birds we see for a workshop the following day. And if you're able to come to that workshop as well, I'll teach you how to beatbox, how to use this gear, and how we're going to make a Bangalore bird box jam. And it's going to be really exciting for me to share with you. And if it sounds intimidating, trust me, it's not. I'm so excited. I just want to say this has been a wonderful experience for me. Already I'm encountering a lot of Indian musicians who have shown me new dimensions of musicality that I have never encountered before. We've made some new tracks already that incorporate traditional music styles, and the sounds are phenomenal. So I really encourage you to come. Even if you're not musical, you can still, I think, tap into a hidden dimension of your own creativity and then express who you are, the way I did as a beatboxer when I was very young and just starting out. This is all a very collaborative learning process. And I'm really excited to share with you because the work has connected me to different ecosystems around the world at the click of a button. And now, for the first time, in person. I'm like very excited to be here. And what I think if we all listen, if you wake up in Brooklyn, where I'm from, or in Bangalore, one of the first things you often hear is beautiful, melodious bird song. So if we learn to all tune in, we can start to appreciate and recognize that natural music as a signature call of the places where we live and an anthem to our natural heritage. And in places where the songs themselves cannot survive, our music can still endure and teach us lessons about the natural world that we might not ever be able to acquire otherwise. All we have to do is tune in and walk through that door, and then the rest will be up to the birds. Thank you for listening.